Good morning. So you have probably heard the sentence, beauty will save the world, right, from Dostoevsky. And you know, we hear this phrase very often, and it sounds very good in a dinner conversation, but what does it really mean, and is it even true? We know that Jesus will save the world, but beauty, really? Is it gonna save the world? And I think it will, actually. I think beauty is very powerful, and it can lead us to God. And I just would like to share an example of that with you right now, and speak about a French writer of the early 20th century, Paul Claudel. So he wasn't a believer, and one night, it was Christmas, he went to Notre Dame in Paris, and he heard Vespers. And when they sang the Magnificat, he had a complete conversion, and he became a man of indestructible faith. So I just would like to read a very short passage of how Paul Claudel describes his own conversion. In an instant, my heart was touched, and I believed. I believed with such a strength of adherence, with such an uplifting of my entire being, with such powerful conviction, with such a certainty, leaving no room for any kind of doubt, that since then, all the books, all the arguments, all the incidents and accidents of a busy life have been unable to shake my faith, nor indeed to affect it in any way. It's quite powerful, you see. We can say that this man was saved by beauty, right? And let me tell you that he probably saved many others because of his art. So you see, beauty has a unique power because it cuts through our reasonings, really. You see, like, when we hear a truth that we don't want to hear, we start finding excuses, right? But we can't do that with beauty, right? When we are in front of something beautiful, it's just breathtaking, and we enjoy it. It's very simple, it's spontaneous. And so it's not terribly complicated. And in our time, you see, there is a lot of craziness going on. It's very relativistic. And so beauty has really something to offer. It can really be an alternative way to God, I think. So to be an artist is to be at the service of this beauty that saves. And today I just would like to speak about 3 artists who were saints. And just I would like to share with you a few thoughts about them, and maybe we will learn something which will help us to be good Christian artists. So where am I? So the first one is Saint Augustine. You see, Saint Augustine, father of the church, bishop, doctor of grace, a philosopher, a saint, but I think he was also an artist. He was a master of the art of rhetoric. He was speaking and writing very, very well. It's so well that still today, 16 centuries later, we still read him, you see. Actually, one of my favorite books is just his Confessions. It's really a masterpiece. So he was born in the declining Roman Empire. And so he was really at the hinge on between the antique world of Rome and the Middle Age. And with Augustine, there is a fruitful encounter between Greek philosophy and Christianity. So that's very important because of this encounter, his work as a philosopher, as a writer, as an artist, just became huge and so fruitful for Christianity until now. So he was born in Tagaste in Algeria, what is now Algeria, from a pagan father, Patricius, and from a Christian mother, Saint Monica, as you know. He studied to become a rhetorician, as I said. It was the right thing to do in order to become rich and powerful at the time. He would become a politician, I guess, and all these things, worldly things. And when he was young, he read a text from Cicero, Hortensius, and it triggered something, and he engaged into a lifelong pursuit of wisdom. He wasn't too interested in Christianity when he was young, so he had a lot of adventures, let's say. He had a concubine, I don't know how you pronounce this word, a girlfriend, let's say. And he had an illegitimate son, Adeodatus. He went to Rome in order to teach. His students were not paying, so he went to Milan. And over there he met Saint Ambrose, the bishop, also doctor of the church. He also started to read the text of Plotinus, a Platonic philosopher. And all this, in addition of the tears and prayers of Saint Monica, prepared him for his conversion. So he converts, and he was baptized in 387, so in his 30s, by Saint Ambrose at Milan. Shortly after this, he had a vision, a mystical vision, alongside with his mother. And I just think I will read a very short passage of that because it's important and very beautiful. So let's see if I can do it with only one hand. Oh, wow. Very good. All right. No, it's not here. Okay, excuse me. All right. So he's just chatting with his mother, and he says, "Our minds were lifted up by an ardent affection towards eternal being itself. Step by step, we climbed beyond all corporeal objects, and the heaven itself, where sun, moon, and stars shed light on the earth. We ascended even further by internal reflection and dialogue and wonder at your works, and we entered into our own minds. We moved up beyond them so as to attain to the region of inexhaustible abundance where you feed Israel eternally with truth for food." It's very beautiful, isn't it? So I will speak about that a little later. So right after this vision, Monikas died. And he returns to Algeria, and he is ordained a priest. He becomes a bishop, writes the confession, and many years later dies in Hippo, where he was a bishop, as the barbarians are about to take the city. So I think the main thing that we need to learn from St. Augustine is just what I just read, you see. With St. Augustine, there is a turn inward, you see, a turn from the things without, the sensible things, the things that you can see, the beauty that you can see, to the things within, you see, the intelligible things, and ultimately God, you see, like the beauty which is found inside, in our soul and in God. And this is not unhealthy introspection, right? It's just intimacy with God, right? And we turn inward, not to stay inward, but to go upward, right? That's the goal. And I think I just would like to read another passage. You know it already for sure, but it really describes this turn inward and this ascent to God. So I just read. Late have I loved you, beauty so old and so new. Late have I loved you, and see you were within, and I was in the external world and sought you there. And in my unlovely state I plunged into those lovely created things which you made. You were with me, and I was with you. The lovely things kept me far from you, though if they did not have their existence in you, they had no existence at all. You called and cried out, loud, and shattered my deafness. You were radiant and resplendent. You put to flight my blindness. You were fragrant, and I drew in my breath, and now pant after you. I tasted you, and I feel but hunger and thirst for you. You touch me, and I am set on fire to attain the peace which is yours. Each time I read that, I just found it so beautiful. This is really, it's the most famous passage in the Confession, and there is a reason for that, right? So you see, he speaks about beautiful things that are beautiful because they exist because of God who created them, but these things can become a distraction, you see, and we really need to turn towards a higher beauty, the highest beauty, which is God. And you see, this passage which I just read, it's part of Book 10, and Book 10 describes the vision of Ostia, so this vision that St. Augustine had with his mother. And the first half of Book 10, he describes this ascent from the sensible object, the visible beauty, to the beauty of interiority. And then to the beauty of God, right? And then, so this passage, O beauty ever ancient and ever new, it's right at the middle, it's the summit of the ascent, right? And then the second half of the book, he speaks about his sins and what he needs to remove, all the obstacles he needs to remove in order to ascend again, to see God. And really that's a message for today, I think. We need to take our conversion seriously, right? Especially as artists. You see, it's a little counterintuitive, you see, because I guess you can say that you can be a good artist and not be a saint, right? Picasso, for instance, he was a genius. He was an awful man. You see, he was a narcissist. But can you imagine what Picasso would have produced if he would have been a saint, right? It would have been amazing, life-changing for many people. And so St. Augustine was an amazing artist, and he didn't fall into this trap of narcissism, right? He could have, right? All the ingredients were there. He was a genius. He could write like nobody else. And he was doing this inner thing, right? And he was like super creative. He could have been enamored with himself. But no, he knew that interiority was a door opened to someone else, right? To someone else. Not himself, but someone else. And Yeah, that's why he's St. Augustine today and not Pablo Picasso. So, yes, that's it for St. Augustine. So now I would like to speak about another artist, St. John of the Cross. St. John of the Cross also took his conversion very seriously, had a deep spiritual life. He was a Spanish mystic, born in 1542, died in 1591. He was a reformer of the Carmelite order alongside with Saint Teresa of Avila. And he was an artist. He was an apprentice woodcarver and drawer. He wasn't very good at it, so he did something else afterward. But nevertheless, he was an amazing poet, right? So his poem, if you never read them, just read them as soon as possible. And you see, like, we have a French poet in France. His name is Louis Aragon. He's a notorious communist. He's dead now. But he loved John of the Cross, you know, so he tells you how much power the poetry of John of the Cross had, you see. And the main message, you see, so the main message for Augustine was interiority, the turn inward. And the main message for John of the Cross is the cross. Da-da. So suffering. And John of the Cross suffered his whole life, basically, you see. His father was rich, but chose to marry a poor woman, and so was disowned by his family. And then his father died when John was only 1 year old. And because of that, his family fell into misery, so much so that his brother Louis died. So he abandoned his apprenticeship as a woodcarver, as I said, because he wasn't very good at it. He became a nurse in a hospital. He loved it because you see, probably he knew what it meant to suffer already, so he could be compassionate. He joined the Carmelite order, became a priest. He experienced dark nights, you see, he had this moment of almost despair, you see, darkness, but this moment of spiritual darkness purified his soul quite a lot, right? And brought him close to God. He became acquainted with Saint Teresa of Avila, joined the Reformed Carmelite, called the Discalced Carmelite. But he was caught by the unreformed Carmelite, and he was imprisoned, flogged by his own brother, starved to death, and humiliated. And that's when he was in prison, he composed his poetry, right, in this place of deep darkness. And finally he escapes, and he works very hard to found many Carmelite convents, but he ends up being despised and forgotten by his own community, and he dies in intense physical pain and in a hostile environment. So, isn't it lovely? So, what's the point of so much suffering? Well, it's a huge mystery, so I'm not gonna be able to explain it too well, but let's just say that Saint John suffered well, and it brought him to God, right? And the cross became a means of sanctification, and he was able to give up lesser beauties, right? So, of course, all the sensible world, the visible beauty, but also spiritual beauties, right? You see, he was able to purify all this consolations, I guess, which are important at some point of our journey towards God, but which are not the ultimate destination. And so he invites us to persevere through difficulty. So now I just would like to read just a little bit of his poetry, just so that you get a little taste of how beautiful and powerful it is. And so let's do it. Okay. All right, so the first one is just one stanza from the poem The Song of the Dark Night. O night that was my guide, O darkness dearer than the morning's pride, O night that joined the lover to the beloved bride, transfiguring them each into the other. Wow, this is so beautiful. You see, so as artists, we will all have dark nights, you see, moments where we don't feel like doing it, where we are misunderstood, we are maybe perhaps even rejected. But this is part of life, and so we need to push through it. And this suffering is shaping our souls. And as you know, our work of art, in some way, it's a reflection of our soul. So it's important and it's valuable. All right, just one more poem. I read the whole thing. Sorry if you are bored. Living Flame of Love. O flame of love so living, how tenderly you force to my soul's inmost core your fiery probe. Since now you've no misgiving, end it, pursue your course, and for our sweet encounter, tear the robe. O cautery more tender, O gash that is my guerdon, O gentle hand, O touch how softly thrilling, eternal life you render, raise of all depths the burden, and change my death to life, even while killing. O lamps of fiery blaze, to whose refulgent fuel the deepest caverns of my soul grow bright. Late blind with gloom and haze, but in this strange renewal, giving to the beloved both heat and light. What peace with love and wreathing you conjure to my breast, which only you your dwelling place may call, while with delicious breathing, in glory, grace, and rest, so daintily in love you make me fall. So, yes, just to sum up about St. John of the Cross, he's someone who took his conversion very seriously because he knew that he was God's work of art. You see, that's Ephesians. It's written, man is God's work of art, says St. Paul in the letter to the Ephesians. And God's work of art is more important than our work of art, right? But the good thing is that it's going to bear fruit. Our conversion is going to bear fruit in our work. So nothing is lost. And suffering led him to God. God was carving his soul as a sculptor carves a piece of marble. And his art was enhanced by his intimacy with God, right? Because he was a saint, his poetry reached a completely stratospheric level, right? Something really magnificent. All right, third saint. is Saint John Paul II, right? Saint John Paul. So he's known as a pope, as a saint, as a pastor, as a philosopher, as a theologian, but he's also an artist, right? And actually he started as an artist. He was an actor and he was a playwright, right? And as Saint John of the Cross, he suffered a lot, and his suffering shaped the great saint that he became. You see, so he was born in 1920 in Poland. At the age of 9, he loses his mother. His elder brother, Edmund, died also very early. He was a doctor and probably caught something like a disease from one of his patients. Watch out, Brett. His father dies when John Paul II was 20 years old. You see, so rather rapidly he remains alone. And he speaks of the period right after his father's death like the darkest period of his life, right? And because of this dark moment, he embraced a life of deep prayer. Under the Nazi occupation, he's involved in theater. So it's important to understand that the Nazis were trying to suppress the Polish culture. So to do theater was an act of resistance, right? But another important point, in 1942, so still during the war, he joins the underground seminary to become a priest. So you see, in some ways, he gives up his art, right? He was a very promising artist, and he gives it up. And I read years ago a retreat that he gave to artists when he was still Cardinal Wojtyła, and he basically said this: our conversion is more important than art. So, yeah, and that's probably why he became a priest, right? Because he wanted to take care of soul rather than art. It does not mean that we are all called to do that, of course, but it helps us to understand what is the hierarchy of things, right? Then communism, of course, more suffering, and then you know the rest. He becomes Pope. So you see, St. John Paul II was very aware of the power of art, being himself an artist. And as you know, he wrote a letter to artists. So it's a text of reference for all of us. It's very readable, it's not complicated, but it's very solid. So if you never read it, I encourage you to read it. I just give you 3 short excerpts. All right, so the first one is here. All right. Not all are called to be artists in the specific sense of the term. Yet, as Genesis has it, all men and women are entrusted with the task of crafting their own life. In a certain sense, they are to make of it a work of art, a masterpiece. It is important to recognize the distinction, but also the connection between these 2 aspects of human activity. The distinction is clear. It is one thing for human beings to be the authors of their own acts with responsibility for their moral value. It is another to be an artist. The distinction between the moral and artistic aspect is fundamental, but no less important is the connection between them. Each conditions the other in a profound way. It's so clear, right? He nails it, right? I have nothing else to say. All right, second short excerpt. Where am I? Sorry. 4. All right. The church, therefore, needs art, but can it also be said that art needs the church? The question may seem like a provocation, yet, rightly understood, it is both legitimate and profound. Artists are constantly in search of the hidden meaning of things, and their torment is to succeed in expressing the word of the ineffable. How then can we fail to see what a great source of inspiration is offered by that kind of homeland of the soul that is religion? So you see, he's speaking about something very important. Faith enhances our work, right? Faith enhances reason, and the church enhances our work. If we're good Christians, our work is going to become better and more significant. And just one last thing. All right, it's a little encouragement for all of us. On the threshold of the third millennium, all right, from this wonder, there can come that enthusiasm of which Norwood spoke. He's a Polish poet, to which I referred earlier. People of today and tomorrow need this enthusiasm, and they are to meet and master the crucial challenges which stand before us. Thanks to this enthusiasm, humanity, every time it loses its way, will be able to lift itself up and set out again on the right path. In this sense, it has been said with profound insight that beauty will save the world. Beauty is a key to the mystery and a call to transcendence. It is an invitation to savor life and to dream of the future. That is why the beauty of created things can never fully satisfy. It stirs that hidden nostalgia for God, which a lover of beauty like Saint Augustine could express in incomparable terms. Late have I loved you, beauty so old and so new. Late have I loved you. So you see, this letter is really a very important text. There is almost everything you need in it to be a Christian artist. It's like an anchor which will stabilize your ship and save you from shipwreck, I guess. So thank you for listening. I think I just would like to finish with a little thought about Our Lady of Paris, right? It's almost my home parish, not exactly, but almost. And it burned down, as you know, a few years ago. And so we need to rebuild that. And you see, Our Lady of Paris was built in the Middle Age. And the Middle Ages, was a time where faith was completely in the culture, was everywhere in the culture. And because of that, all these cathedrals in Europe came to existence. And it would be nice to recover something like that. Certainly not the same, but something like that. And you see, all these artists who built the cathedrals, nobody knows their names, you see. It's okay. You know, they didn't care, probably, you see. They were not worried by themselves. They were just trying to do a good job and to worship God, not themselves. So that's the message for today. Thank you for your involvement in art, and I pray for you for your ministry. And now I will call James, who will continue this talk. God bless you.